So, The Amazing Atheist just made a video about God and evolution, or this idea of theistic evolution, those who believe in a creator, but who also believe in evolution and, some version of Big Bang cosmology. And he's just, laid out that premise, and then he says this.
So in other words, everything that you know about evolution, natural selection, random genetic mutation, all of those components of evolution, they are all somehow controlled and manipulated by an all-powerful being who is looking to create specific results.
I wouldn't say that. I would say, in at least my version of what could be called a spiritual evolution, I would say that natural selection still operates in just the way that, reductionistic science currently understands it. It's a mechanism that allows for the possibility of changes between species. It allows for the continual transformation of species over time. But the question for me, and I think for a lot of other theistic evolutionists or spiritual evolutionists, is whether or not natural selection can explain biological diversity and the evolutionary process. I think it certainly takes place. Natural selection and variation, this certainly occurs, and I'm sure it has effects. I just don't think that those effects are explanatory of what we see, biologically speaking. Common descent is what's unquestionable. The mechanism, or the cause underlying the mechanism responsible for this evolutionary process, that's what the theistic evolutionists are bringing into question. But this doesn't necessarily mean that God is reaching in from outside to continually tinker with the way that this living natural process is unfolding. For one theistic evolutionist in particular, the one that I'm most familiar with, the paleontologist Teilhard de Chardin, he saw the divine working in the natural world from the inside out, so that there was a within to things which, physics and mechanistic biology don't really pay attention to. They're just concerned with the exterior, the material surfaces. The within of things is sort of the motive force for it, the psychic energy that drives it forward. And so matter has this propensity to complexify because of its withinness. And so matter comes to life, and then it moves from single-celled, non-nucleated organisms to eukaryotic cells with all these organelles, with complex genetic mechanisms where the genome is housed in the nucleus, and then all of a sudden you get these cellular colonies which become multicellular organisms with complex symmetrical body plans, and then you go from amphibians to reptiles, to mammals, to primates, to the Homo genus, to modern human beings, astronauts and philosophers and scientists and so forth. There's a clear progression here. It appears that the universe is going somewhere, because this process of evolution, it continues before life emerged on Earth. Matter has a genetic history, just as organisms do. It doesn't have genes. I'm saying it has. There is a process of material development that had to occur before an atom could exist, before stars could exist, before solar systems could exist. There's a history to this process, a history of creation, of Genesis. And so the theistic evolutionist is saying not that God reaches in and tinkers, but that God is reaching from within out. And the expression of God's love, you could say, is the creative impetus for what we see the universe doing right now. And it's almost to say that there was not a creation moment, at least not one which has yet finished. creation is still unfinished. It's being finished, and we are participating in it. I think that's the ultimate direction you must head if you are a theistic evolutionist. Creation hasn't happened yet. Of course, you could say that Christ is returning, and for someone like Teilhard de Chardin, the return of Christ is also, while it's a spiritual event, it's also a historical and a cosmological event, a natural event, something which will occur in the flesh. So, in other words, he talked about the noosphere, the mental envelope which would surround the planet when human beings became so self-reflective that they entered a new dimension of reality that was based in some way on an understanding of their, our own mutuality, the sense in which we exist together. So, in other words, of love. So, I think evolution and religion can go together if you're willing to use your imagination. Let me play the rest of The Amusing Atheist video.
I didn't know that it was that easy to reconcile the naturalistic and the supernatural. It's
not easy, but you can do it.
Simply both. Why settle for one good explanation when you can have two at the same time?
You don't want two explanations. You want a synthetic, single explanation. You want to be able to see, okay, here's this empirical scientific data, this observed evidence that we have about how the universe has gotten to the point it is now. Now let's try to explain that. Theistic evolution says you can't do it unless you don't have to have a supernatural tinkerer, an intelligent designer that reaches in and literally shapes mechanisms in cells. You can instead see matter as having this interior intrinsic to it, and that God reaches out over billions of years toward some sort of omega point, some sort of full embodiment of God in matter. So spirit involves itself in matter so that matter can evolve back to spirit. We want a synthesis. We don't want two separate explanations.
There was a big bang, but, God probably kick-started it. And sure, the diversity of life on Earth is due to a natural process called evolution, but God was there watching and protecting certain species.
See, the challenge for a theistic evolutionist is to come up with some way of relating to God that isn't as much a caricature and an anthropomorphization as what The Amazing Atheist is talking about here. We need a more mature God if we're going to take evolution into account, because you need to do a bit of theodicy. You have to deal with evil, and I think there are ways of dealing with evil in an evolutionary universe. But the classical understanding of God needs to be completely reworked. God can no longer be omniscient. God can no longer be all-powerful either, all-knowing or all-powerful, because there is some sort of free creative ability to the universe itself, though again, God is sort of the within of the universe. So God doesn't necessarily know, God as the within of the universe doesn't necessarily know what God is going to do next. Though, see, there's also a transcendent aspect to God, but now we're getting too complicated. Let's finish TJ's video.
And, nudging things this way or that, trying to kind of steer it towards, us, the ultimate creatures on God's green earth, of course. Hey, and
See, what I said before about the direction of evolution, it may seem to some people that implies that human beings are somehow the best, creation, the best creature on Earth, and that somehow we're most valuable and nothing else on Earth matters. All the other creatures are ours to do with what we please. I don't think that. I think that what is really fundamental is the Earth, and the human beings are a particular organ system on what is the body of the Earth, and the body as a whole is what is alive and what is valuable. The human being, I think, human civilization has a certain task that it has been called to fulfill on this planet. And, so far we've been definitely fucking up the place. But that's not to say that there isn't still hope, because we've also done some astonishing things. We've accomplished a lot. It's just a matter of us recognizing fully, for the first time, our actual context, the universe that we live in and the ecosystems that we are embedded within. We're still coming to terms with that, but I think once we have come to terms with that, our presence on the earth has the opportunity to become far more beautiful and, in fact, celebratory, I think.
Theory of gravity, yeah, sure, objects are pulled down by gravity, but they're also pulled down by goblins with magic invisible strings. Ooh, yeah. So even if gravity wasn't pulling them down, the goblins would be pulling them down. And see how much two explanations just makes...
See, gravity is an interesting example to bring up because we don't have a naturalistic explanation for gravity. We don't know the cause of gravity. We can describe it. Newton described it as a force, mathematically. Einstein described it as a curvature of space-time geometrically. Apparently string theory can describe it in another way as some kind of multidimensionality. But these are all descriptions that really we can test to see if they're not wrong, but we can't test to see if they are right. They give us a certain level of focus upon the universe, and they work within that level of focus. But as soon as we get a slightly clearer picture of, reality, we find, there's all these exceptions. Quantum physics and relativity theory don't line up. So one of them or both of them have to be wrong. So the point is, we don't understand the cause of gravity. Newton said it was the finger of God. Einstein said it's the curvature of space-time, but what causes curvature? There's not really an answer for that. It's just passing the buck to this deeper layer of theoretical construction. It's not really answering anything. Gravity, I think, is the love that matter has for itself. The cause of gravity is love, is attraction. And you could say that's a supernatural explanation, but if you're going to offer an explanation, you've got to offer one, and there isn't one offered in science, because gravity is one of those things that requires thinking cosmologically, and as soon as you've done that, transcendence being what was before the Big Bang and what is outside of the universe. Because our naturalistic descriptions require that those questions be possible to ask, we're already facing these transcendent or theological questions, and we've got to say something about them, and science doesn't help us say much about them. Gravity is one of those things, because it has to do with the fact that the universe is expanding and that things happen. The fact that anything should be happening at all is extremely bizarre. That's the fundamental question. And gravity is one of the fundamental forces that allows anything to begin happening, that allows complexity to occur. And it's not that we want two explanations for it, it's that to explain gravity at all, even once, I think we need to talk about some sort of spiritual quality to natural surface and physical phenomena. There's something behind the phenomena involved in how the phenomena evolve.
More sense than just one. And Newton's first law of motion? That's true. An object won't move until it's acted upon by another object, but at the same time, they're also moved by magic pixies and inertia.
Well, as I said, Newton thought that God's finger started the universe and keeps it constantly in motion.
It's fun! See, there's a naturalistic world where everything can be proved rationally, but then right behind the curtain, there's a supernatural magical world that we can't prove in any way, but just assume exists because... what?
See, there's a difference in science between description and explanation. We prove that certain theoretical descriptions of nature are not false. But, the nature of a paradigm shift, which science is constantly going through, is such that you discover so many abnormalities that your theory doesn't explain that you have to rework your theory And so the knowledge that science is giving us about the world is always at the level of description. If you want explanation, you need to start doing, philosophy and metaphysics and theology. You need to understand something invisible underlying the phenomena. And science does this as soon as it begins talking about causality. There's no empirical evidence for causality. You need to start understanding how, what's underlying the things that you observe if you want to talk about causality or gravity.
Why would you believe in a God if you already have an explanation in evolution? Why would you believe...
Again, Darwin's theory of evolution by variation under natural selection is a description of a process which only explains the possibility of the change of species over time. It does not explain this tendency towards complexity. It doesn't explain self-organization, an organism's ability to self-produce. It doesn't explain the symmetry of our body plans. There's another factor involved. We don't have to call it supernatural even, but I don't know that there's a better name for it. It's something that it's built into the universe that it wants to evolve, and I think to understand that, if you can either say I don't know, or you can try to understand it. And to understand it, you need more than a mechanical description. You need a teleological reason, and that's where the theistic part of theistic evolution comes into the picture.
Believe that God created man when evolution already provides the answer to that question? Why would you believe that God created the universe when the Big Bang already provides an answer to that question?
The Big Bang does not provide an answer to what created the Big Bang.
Question. Doesn't make much sense, folks. Just doesn't make much fucking sense. Hey.
Well, maybe it doesn't. Or maybe I made a little bit of sense trying to tell you why it does. But we'll see, I guess.